All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. It is Tuesday, and you know what that means. Time to dive deeper into the wisdom and classical teachings on spiritual truth and enlightenment from the wisdom of Dr. David R. Hawkins. And we've been going through the bonus materials the last couple weeks. And if you missed that, it's been fantastic because it's a breakdown of David Hawkins' valuable qualities for a spiritual seeker. And so we've gone through some wonderful stuff there. And today we find ourselves on the last little bit of that. And as well, we will be going through some more wisdom of the Tao. Tuesday Tao, do the Tao now. So change your thoughts, change your life. Living the Wisdom of the Tao by Dr. Wayne W. Dyer as well. And the verse we'll be looking at today, after we finish up the bonus materials in the wisdom of Dr. David R. Hawkins, is living by letting go. And the 55th verse that comes to us from Lao-tzu. But now, ladies and gentlemen, hope everybody's having a wonderful day wherever you are, and I hope it's beautiful, and hope you got yourself a beverage and you are comfy, because we are about to dive into, I believe, talking about the ego. Earlier last week, we were talking about the ego was inherited along with becoming a human being. And that was very fascinating. I'll read it real quick. The ego is a product of the brain and the function of the brain. And details differ based on past karma of how this expresses itself. The ego is one thing, the brain function is another matter. And so when you add these two mixed together, combined with the aspect of the past karma, it says now karma is not that well known in the Western world, but once you grab onto karma, you'll find that it is a very handy tool. And he leaves it very vague there, but an interesting point nonetheless. And so I think where we left off last time is right here, saying the grace of God, quote unquote, the Tao, Atum, universe, grand organized design, that which we are a part of and connected to, the grace of God is available to everyone. To everyone, ladies and gentlemen. That's the most important, encouraging one of all when it comes to valuable qualities to have for a spiritual seeker, or maybe more well said would be valuable understandings to have for a spiritual seeker, but that's the most encouraging one of all. When you ask for God's help, God's grace is available to everyone, the book says, or Dr. David Hawkins says. And if you've never heard of Dr. David Hawkins, I'll add now, definitely look him up and learn a little bit more about him, because he's had a profound influence on the community around spirituality and enlightenment, and much, much more. So, historically, the grace of a sage is available to the committed spiritual seeker. The consciousness of a spiritual teacher, especially the sage, radiates forth into the world. The grace of the sage is transmitted by the actual physical presence of the consciousness of the teacher. I wished it would go via the written page, David Hawkins says, but the laws of consciousness are that the power of the teacher transmits into the consciousness of the student. This is very fascinating. And therefore, unfortunately, one does have to be in the actual physical presence of the teacher at some point in one's spiritual evolution. Happily, there's enough power in the teachers that are available because it accumulates over time. So the spiritual power of the great teachers who once lived is the spiritual power of these great teachers that we all know from history, the great sages and wise masters, whether it be Lao-tzu or any others. These that once lived but are no longer in the living body. So their spiritual power is still available because it's transmitted down from one sage to the consciousness level of the next. So we, throughout time, by the influence of positive influences of consciousness, and in other works of David Hawkins up here, Power versus Force, I believe it was, or the Eye of the Eye, he talks about the influence that a small level of extremely high consciousness individuals, the kind of impact or maybe balancing out that they would have on a large number of, most of us living at low levels of consciousness, sub 200 at least. But it was just very fascinating that it would take very few to balance out as compared to the great number of low consciousness that we have here in the physical realm. But over time, as I think this is describing, so the spiritual power of these great teachers who once lived or are no longer in a living body is still available because it's transmitted down from one sage to the consciousness level of the next, as well as the next generation. So throughout time, what I'm getting here and what I'm thinking is that we would go through these cycles of a rising of consciousness, kind of a slow progression, while there would be these sages and high consciousness individuals amongst us throughout this slow progression. They would be the ones really influencing the rise, and then that would go in alignment with the cycles that we experience, the great year or the yuga or whatever you want to call it. And we would rise to the golden ages and, Atlantis or whatever that was for you, Lumeria, and then fall once again in consciousness over time to the dark ages and do this loop. And this could possibly be the nature of reality, but that's why we're here, ladies and gentlemen, seeking to discover the mysteries and ask the greatest questions, because we need to continue to ask questions and, more importantly, question the answers that we're given and also that we are getting for ourselves. I don't know where that tangent came from, but hopefully you're getting value. And if you are, then thank you so much for being here. I love and appreciate each and every one of you. And let us continue. Now, this is very fascinating. The level of consciousness passing down over time, whether it's an increase or a decrease, but there is a definite value to being in the physical presence of the consciousness of the teacher. And there are stories about these gurus where when they would come into a village or a town that, they would, just their presence alone would have an impact. And we know this to be true in our own lives if you look for subtle synchronicities of this kind of thing. And if you've never joined me before, don't worry, this is just me reading some spiritual philosophy because I'm really fascinated with this, and then I like to ramble about it. And I found that it's easier for me to do that here on a channel with you. So once again, thank you so much for being here. Next valuable understanding or quality to have for a spiritual seeker is this: the strength of the ego can be quite formidable. I always think of the saying, the ego makes an excellent servant, but a terrible master. Because if you are run and controlled by your ego, then you may end up missing the mark, so to speak, on the wrong path, experiencing less quality of life, because that's why we're here. We're seeking to increase our awareness and understanding so that we can then hopefully use that to increase the quality of our life. Because remember, When you change the way you look at things, the things that you look at somehow change, even though they would seem to be the same for someone else, but it's your perspective. And so the strength of the ego can be quite formidable. And without the assistance, Dr. Hawkins begins, of the power of a higher spiritual being, the ego cannot itself be transcended. And let me go back here before we continue to a previous point. So if you missed one of the previous videos, but this will link together. Realize that salvation and enlightenment are somewhat different goals. And so he was saying right there, without the assistance and power of a higher spiritual being, the ego cannot itself be transcended. And when statements are made like the assistance and power of a higher spiritual being, we're not like seeking for help from angels or, you know, things outside of ourselves. We're thinking of this in terms of a connection to source, and God is everything. And there are human beings who became wise through maybe, be it many past lives, and, you know, as I was talking about earlier, the past karma building up over time. But, you know, whatever the details of that are irrelevant, because there are those that have had an impact on the consciousness level of humanity through great wisdom and philosophy and spirituality. And so that's what is being meant by the assistance and the power of a higher spiritual being, a human being who was of such a, you know, divine mind, maybe, so to speak. And there have been so many of these throughout the centuries. We went through, if you've never heard of this book, Wisdom of the Ages, 60 Days to Enlightenment by Dr. Dyer, and he does a full collection of writings, poems, and sayings by some of the greatest thinkers of the past 25 centuries, 250 years, and goes into a lot of these high-level spiritual beings. And so with that being said, realizing that salvation and enlightenment are somewhat different goals. Salvation is concerned with yes or no. Enlightenment is concerned with becoming something beyond which you have already been. Elevation, ascension. And so salvation requires a purification of the ego. Enlightenment is concerned with letting it go and transcending the ego. The goal of enlightenment is somewhat more demanding than simply being a good person. Enlightenment is something other than good personhood. It is advancing one's level of consciousness in the non-linear terms. And so that links in right to what we were saying here with the strength of the ego can be quite formidable. And without the assistance and power of great wisdom, the wisdom of the ages is what I've called it, because that's the perfect name for this collection of knowledge that has been passed down through the centuries by these sages. And so with this wisdom of the ages, the ego itself, without the assistance of this great wisdom, the ego itself cannot be transcended. So this is a lesson in achieving enlightenment, I guess. I never know what to title these videos because it goes in so many directions. Everything is connected, it would seem. But the ego itself cannot be transcended. Through one indirect benefit, though, one indirect benefit one gets from being in the physical presence of the consciousness field of an enlightened teacher is that it diminishes the hold of the ego and increases your power to transcend it. Interesting. This is because of your own intention. And remember, intention is the most powerful force. Some people like to call it magic. It is very amazing and magical in the way that it works. But intention is the most powerful thing that we have at our disposal. And so be very careful what you focus on. Remember, what you think about expands. The secret of the universe. What you think about expands, because what you focus on eventually becomes what you have to act on. So with that being said, this is because of our own intention. With a person who does not wish this to happen, it will not happen. You say, quote, I refuse to listen to this guy. I'm not going to pay attention. He's full of bunk, as Dr. Hawkins put it. Then that is what it will be for you. This goes back to perspective, affecting the actual experience of reality and changing it for you. And so this is, and things will remain the same. Skepticism and doubt, therefore, are not any great service. They don't help you. It's like we have to be open-minded enough to where even if we had skepticism and doubt, we are not closing ourselves off to more awareness, more understanding, more possibilities. See, someone once asked, why do you have a globe in the background when you know the earth is a flat plane? And that's perfectly fine for me, and I appreciate the comment. I'm open to all possibilities, whether it's a, oblique spheroid, or oblique maybe is the correct word there, or it's a, anyways, there are many possibilities, and there's a lot of great arguments. So I'm open to holding two opposing opinions in my mind to be possible at the same time. And that's just fine. And that gives me an ability to take in more information from both sides. And you can see how you can gain a greater perspective and awareness by not closing yourself off to things with a bunch of skepticism and doubt. Therefore, they are not of any great service for us. The strength of the ego, David Hawkins continues, can be formidable. And without the assistance and the power of the wisdom of the ages or great spiritual teachers, ego cannot itself transcend itself, which is a powerful statement. The ego itself cannot transcend itself. We have to come from a different perspective. And it finishes up here at the very finish of this book, which we started here at the end in the bonus material. So don't worry, you didn't miss it all. We will be doing a series probably with a lot of this. The sound of God is silence. Silence weirdly calibrates at consciousness level of 1000. I never heard that. To have sound, you have to have linearity. You have to have that which is sound and that which is not sound, therefore being in the world of duality. Wow. That's weird that I just randomly flipped here to page 43. I'll have this book linked below in the description so you can get it for yourself. You put it on your shelf and you can follow along and join me in the journey. But page 43, this is mind-blowing. You have that which is sound and that which is not sound. To have sound, you have to have linearity and duality. And then you have to give a configuration to the sound. Therefore, mantras and other things like saying Om will take you to a certain level, which is good, actually. Frequencies are powerful because we are here in the realm of duality and, mortality and physicality. And beyond that, you will become aware of the silence that is behind the sound. The spaces between the notes is what makes the music. Because if you have a continuous note, you do not have music. And it is the space between the bars that holds the tiger. I love that one. There's a lot of ones you could come up with. like that with that metaphor there, but it is so true. And it is this background, like it is the black behind the sky that allows us to see the stars. And this goes back to the Hermetics and the goddess Destiny, which is the night sky, and destiny inscribed as the stars across her body, which is very fascinating spiritual philosophy. We'll be diving further into the Hermetics and the Corpus Hermeticum tomorrow, finishing up the second book entitled Pomander, which has been fascinating description of creation and the creation of humankind and so much. So the purpose of the sound is to take you to the silence whenever you're doing mantras. That's why repeating a mantra can sometimes really just lead to an altered state of consciousness, and the high feeling that you get disappears when you stop the mantra. Very fascinating. We will get back to that in the future on this series, looking at the wisdom of Dr. David R. Hawkins. Fortunately, he continues, the power of the consciousness of every great teacher or avatar who has ever lived still remains and is available to us. Ladies and gentlemen, to focus on a teacher or their teachings by meditation. So remember what Thoth, the Egyptian sage god, said: constant contemplation, pure philosophy is spiritual striving through constant contemplation and meditation to attain true knowledge of the things that are, or of Atum, he called the one God, which is encompassing of all of reality. So we must continue this constant contemplation on the wisdom of the ages. For the power of the consciousness of every great teacher or avatar who has ever lived still remains and is available to us, ladies and gentlemen. To focus on a teacher or their teachings by meditation makes the power of that teacher available to the seeker. I'll ask you now, are you a seeker? Well, I'm betting if you're here watching this video, then you certainly are. So down through the centuries, the power of the consciousness of the great beings is now present. And David Hawkins and his Institute of Applied Kinesiology, which is legitimate science, has calibrated this statement to be true. It is now available to every student, and it is our karmic right. It is your karmic right. It is your right by virtue of our declaration. So we must have the intention and declare to ourselves to benefit from the consciousness of all the greatest teachers who have ever lived. And that is a boon to the wisdom of Dr. David R. Hawkins and the bonus materials of valuable understandings and qualities for a spiritual seeker. Boom, ladies and gentlemen. Now, hope you're getting value. If you are, thank you so much for being here. I love to chat with those of you in the premieres, in the live chat. I would do live shows. Maybe I'll do that in the future, but it's hard for me to stay focused, act like I'm having a conversation with you. And then it'd be even more difficult to do that and interact with the chat room at the same time, but it might be a lot of fun. So leave me a comment. Let me know if you want to try that. And now we'll be diving into Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life, Living the Wisdom of the Tao by Dr. Wayne W. Dyer. But the Tao Te Ching comes to us from Lao-tzu from 2,500 years ago, 500 years before the birth of Jesus. It's always funny though, because now I'll leave that debate for another day. Jesus is an interesting debate though, and we'll just say that much. Remember, holding two opposing possibilities at the same time. Because I personally think the name and the whole story we're given is kind of irrelevant to there being a sage guru master teacher guy that went around and taught some true spiritual understanding. And so I'll leave it there. Living by letting go. In the 55th verse of the Tao Te Ching. Perhaps you've observed people, Wayne Dyer says, who seem to get all the breaks, appearing to be impervious to the terrible things that come into so many people's lives. For example, do you know someone who seldom ever gets sick, like even during flu season and they're always spending time in close contact with other people, and you're just like, how is this is what I call the science of lucky people, and I learned this from Dr. Wayne Dyer, and what this is all about is aligning with the force, with God, with the Tao, Atum, whatever you call it, aligning with that which you are a part of and getting closer to harmony with that in your life. So this is very deep, and just take it at surface level here. Wayne Dyer continues, these people who seldom ever get sick in spite of spending the flu season in close contact with people who are coughing and sneezing all the time. It's like, how is this possible? How about those who emerged, and don't get in any trouble after committing a bunch of crimes? I don't personally know anybody like that, but I can imagine people know people like that out there. And so once again, it's like you might say these lucky few seem to have, guardian angels, or you just say they're lucky. Is it luck, really? I'll ask the question. And what is this thing that we call luck? Well, you might say that these lucky few have guardian angels that protect them from the provocations of the symbolic, quote unquote, deadly insects and wild beasts and birds of prey mentioned in the opening lines of the 55th verse of the Tao Te Ching. And right there, I will now read to you the 55th verse of the Tao Te Ching. He who is in harmony with the Tao is like a newborn child. Deadly insects will not sting him. Wild beasts will not attack him. Birds of prey will not strike him. Bones are weak, muscles are soft, yet his grasp is firm. He has not experienced the union of man and woman, but is whole. His manhood is strong. He screams all day without becoming hoarse. This is perfect harmony. To know harmony is to know the changeless. To know the changeless is to have insight. Things in harmony with the Tao remain. Things that are forced grow for a while, but then wither away. This is not the Tao, and whatever is against the Tao soon ceases to be. And that is the 55th verse of the Tao Te Ching. Remember, the Tao referring to that which cannot be described. God, kind of, this thing. See, that's also why I'm here. I found throughout my life, I was raised Christian, taught that version of God. And then I was like, oh, wait a minute, everybody's got a God. And I was like, everybody seems to also have these kind of mutual spiritual philosophies, and then we're debating about details. I'm like, shouldn't we all be working together to find out what this thing is that we all are calling by different names that is like the most impactful influence on reality, I guess? With that being said, what is the Tao, Chase? If you've never been described the Tao, I'll do that for you now. The Tao cannot be told, and this is the first verse. It is not the Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. So if you can describe it, then it is not it. If you can name it, then that is also not it. Because it is both God, or what, the Tao, Atum, universe, is both named and nameless. As nameless, it is the origin of all things. As named, it is all things. So all the things that we see here that are separate, tables and chairs and paintings and books and, me and you and all of that is what happens when we try to describe and name and, we separate and categorize. As nameless, it is the origin or the source of all things. Ever desireless, one can see the mystery. Ever desiring, one sees only the manifestations. And the mystery itself is the doorway to all understanding. That's a powerful one, too. I didn't know we'd go there. That is the first verse of the Tao Te Ching. And so back to what Wayne was saying here, when it mentioned in the beginning that when you are in harmony with the Tao, these quote unquote symbolic deadly insects, wild beasts, and birds of prey mentioned in the opening lines of this passage, you will not be affected by these things metaphorically. We're not talking about actual birds attacking you. However, that may be true as well when you're in this aligned state. It makes me think of the people that hold the cobra snakes. And I remember hearing an interview about a guy that was talking about that. And he said the snakes can actually sense the chemicals that we produce. It's like part of their, survival, evolution, their genetic evolutionary biology for survival. Maybe that's the right group of words to describe it, but they can sense our, whether we have fear or whether we are completely at peace and this was very fascinating. So you have to be like blissed out or very, very peaceful to be able to handle these deadly snakes. I thought that was fascinating. And that's another pointer towards this, reaching this higher level of awareness or consciousness, and hopefully increasing the quality of your life along the way, because our lives are made up of moments, ladies and gentlemen. So I hope you enjoyed this one today. I always have fun just going wherever my mind takes me and wherever the Tao or the universe takes me. So I won't take too much more of your time, and I always appreciate you being here. Let's finish this up real quick. So Wayne says, but Lao-tzu knows that these men and women who are simply in harmony with the Tao, just as some individuals appear to have the right people show up in their lives at the right time, while others seem to have a knack for making money materialize just when it's needed most. Lao-tzu says that we should look to infants, as the mention of the newborn child being like child in this verse. We should look to infants who haven't yet taken on the ego belief that they are separate from their originating source. I know one guy joked they cry so much because they just got taken away from oneness and being one with God. And then they're shoved here in a duality of good and bad. Anyways, a little levity. We need comedy here too. It's always fun, ladies and gentlemen. So consequently, they have what could be considered, quote unquote, magical powers. They can scream all day and never lose their voice like a screeching adult would. Even when with underdeveloped muscles, they can fashion a firm grip around your little pinky finger. Furthermore, babies are pliable and virtually immune to harm from a fall that would break the bones of a grown person. All of this is called quote unquote perfect harmony by Lao-tzu. That was funny. We had that last week, if you noticed. So verse 55 of the Tao Te Ching invites you to realize that what you call luck, so this goes back to this creating, like manifesting or creating a higher quality, creating luck for yourself, the science of lucky people, invites you to realize that what you call luck isn't something that randomly happens. It's yours for life when you decide to live by letting go. What do you mean, Wayne? You attract the cooperative power of reality. He calls it of the Tao when you release the need to control your life. So if you can go with the flow, as the old, adage goes, that was just profound. I needed that. Hopefully somebody else did too. The verse 55 of the Tao Te Ching invites us today to realize that what we call luck isn't something that randomly happens. And it's ours for life when we decide to live by letting go of trying to force and control everything. And when we can do that, we begin to attract the cooperative principle of reality, of the Tao, of God. When we realize that we are able to release the need to control our lives. So change your thoughts and see how your life changes to a very fortunate one indeed. Let go and exist in harmony with the Tao in order to build up. And so I'll finish now. That was fantastic, ladies and gentlemen. Do the Tao now, Wayne says. If you've never got this book and you never went through this series with me, then at the end of every one of these, he gives us a do the Tao now. Tuesday Tao. That's why we're here. Dedicate a week to charting incidents of quote unquote things working out without your having to control or make them happen. So just automatically, wow, that worked out. This will mean consciously choosing situations where you curb your automatic impulse to control the outcome. Relax. When you want to tense up, remind yourself. Be mindful and trust in as many situations as you can. At the end of the week, notice how changing the way you think has changed your life. And that is a boom to Dr. Wayne W. Dyer and the living the wisdom of the Tao Te Ching. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being here. I love and appreciate each and every one of you for spending time here with me on this channel. And it just means so much to me that you would actually, I think we just hit 920 subscribers. It's amazing. I thought I'm just going to show up every week. And if I get 5 viewers, then that's perfectly fine. I'm not concerned with that. I'm just concerned with reading these books and having a good time to seek to achieve. Remember, we're here to increase our awareness and our understanding of the nature of reality in our own minds so that we can hopefully increase the quality of our experience of our lives. And hopefully not only our lives, but the lives of those around us. And remember to seek to achieve and maintain happiness through enlightenment and a greater understanding. Seek to discover the mysteries of the ages and the mysteries of our history. And remember that there is no way to happiness. Happiness is the way. So if we can bring it to life, then all the things we've been telling ourselves, oh, I'll be happy then, becomes irrelevant because then we are there. And hopefully the entire journey is wonderful. I'm really hoping that for you because we all struggle in life. So hopefully the entire journey is wonderful when we can bring it to life. Love you, ladies and gentlemen. Remember to check the description below to get the books for yourself, to put them on your shelf so you can follow along in the future. Expand that description. Check out my landscape paintings as well as the link to C60 Purple Power. Until tomorrow, be the change that you want to see. Be the example. No, 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 no.